Polls have closed in the United Kingdom after a snap 6-week election campaign. An exit poll suggests a huge majority for Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Some huge changes here as Conservatives drop from 344 seats to 131. Labour doubles from 205 to 410, and the Liberal Democrats grow from 15 to 61, while Reform UK is projected to gain 13 MPs. Now, these are unofficial results. These are projections based on an exit poll. But it raises a lot of questions, such as what is next for the British Conservative Party after what is likely a landslide loss. Former UK Conservative MP Andrew Percy joins me now from London. Andrew Percy, good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. Happy to be here.
I know they're not the final results, but you know from having run multiple times that these exit polls are often pretty accurate in their projections. What do you make of that sort of stunning drop in seats for the Conservatives?
Well, look, we've had polls now for the last few weeks which have been predicting that the Conservatives could be facing a 1993 type Canadian Tory wipeout. I mean, that's not happened. The Conservative Party looks to have won enough seats to survive, to fight as an effective opposition. But, you know, we have to take the exit polls on face value. They're normally fairly accurate. So, you know, it's not a good night for the Conservatives, but it's also not a 1993 type Tory wipeout.
No, but one of the things, the 1993 Tory wipeout, which was historically catastrophic, is the only way to describe it, going from government to 2 seats. There was also the rise of the Reform Party in Canada, which reshaped federal politics, national politics for the decades after that. We now have Reform UK under Nigel Farage, expected to get 13 seats in the House of Commons, and that's a level they have never been at before. When you look at that, what are your thoughts as a Conservative?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some big differences to the 93 analogy. For a start, the Reform Party in Canada was obviously a regional party based out in Western Canada. That's not the same for Reform UK. I'm still suspicious of this poll as to whether they'll hit 13 seats, but the fact they've won any seats is obviously for them a very good evening. And you have other things going on here as well. It looks like the Scottish National Party, the separatists, have done very badly in Scotland. That's different again to that 93 analogy where the Bloc did incredibly well in Quebec. But but there is a problem here for the Conservative Party with Reform actually having MPs, as it looks like they will do this evening. One of those is likely to be Nigel Farage. That is a big problem for the Conservatives in the next Parliament, because they will face on this right-wing Eurosceptic flank a group of MPs who are going to be trying to drag them in that direction, whereas at the same time, the Conservative Party will be trying to find its new centre for taking on what is a Labour government with a very big majority. So it's going to be a real challenge for the Conservative Party as to how it resolves that conflict between this right-wing Reform challenge and having lost to a Labour Party that has undoubtedly placed itself more closely to the political centre.
Where do you think they go in the wake of this? You know, I mean, it's been 14 years, 6 prime ministers, 3 of them in rapid succession, and, you know, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak kind of having fairly disastrous political tenures. If you look at her short time and this election result, I mean, where do they go? Like, where is that fight for the Conservative Party headed after this, you think?
Well, look, this all depends where we end up this evening. I'm still hopeful. I think there's good cause to think the Conservatives might do a little bit better than the exit poll is suggesting. But look, there'll be a fight for the soul of the party now, and the challenge will be: does the Conservative Party try to lean towards this Reform, more right-wing challenge that it's been facing, or does it go and try and find a new leader who's going to take it to the political centre? Now, the problem with Conservative parties, and actually not just Conservative parties, when they go into opposition generally, is parties tend to retreat either to the right or to the left. And that's not where elections are won in Britain. They're not where elections are won in Canada, really. They're won from the political centre. You know, we're not seeing what we've seen across the water over in Europe, where there's this big surge of the far right. Elections here tend to be won from the political centre, and there will be a fight now for the soul of the Conservative Party, and it's not clear at this stage where that will go. I personally think and hope it will be towards the political centre, because that's where most of the electorate is. But, you know, Conservative parties in opposition in the UK and in Canada tend to go through a lengthy period of of moving to the right and then trying to figure a way back to a place where most of the electorate is. And that's what happened to the Tories here after 97. I hope that's not what happens to us after what is likely to be a very significant defeat this evening.
Well, you talk about moving to the centre to win, and that is certainly what Keir Starmer has really tried to do with Labour throughout this campaign. It's a very different Labour Party than it was under Jeremy Corbyn. I think is quite not an overstatement. I mean, what do you make of his ability to govern as a centrist party? Oh, are we going to? Oh, 1 second, Andy. All right, we have the first result, the official result. Labour Party is holding the seat. What's the riding there, Tyler? Sunderland South? Okay, there you go. We have the first riding, Andy. There you go. Because they don't announce results in the UK until every vote is counted. It's not like here in Canada where we have like a hockey score rolling up on the bottom of the screen. So a hold for Labour, not a surprise there. But, you know, this is one of many we expect tonight, Andy Percy. And because they've moved to the centre, this supermajority that they warned about, can he govern as a centrist party and not be beholden to that more leftist flank, that the Corbyn remnants of the party?
Well, I mean, some of them are still there. I mean, this is for all Keir Starmer's done. I mean, he hasn't turned the Labour Party into the Labour Party of Tony Blair, right, which people enthusiastically went out to vote for. He's turned them into a boring party that wasn't the Tories. I don't think that bodes well for him in the long run, because there isn't that enthusiasm there isn't this Blair wave as there was in 97. He'll have won by a similar amount, but with a lot less goodwill from the public. But actually winning a big majority does mean he's not going to be reliant on some of these more fringe left-wing elements that had taken the Labour Party to a deeply, deeply unpleasant place under Jeremy Corbyn, and which was so rejected by the British public but 4.5 years ago. So I think the fact he'll have a big majority will make that task easy for him. But as I say, the big problem for him is there hasn't really been the same enthusiasm. So they'll have a big victory, but you know they're coming into this with very low expectations and with relatively poor poll ratings. When you look at the ratings for Keir Starmer, he's no Tony Blair,
right?
But he will have a majority that will allow him to do a lot that he won't be getting pulled to the left by the 30 or 40 hard left MPs, because he'll be able to ignore those, to be quite blunt about it.
It's interesting, though, that a Labour landslide with low enthusiasm, as you describe it. So you look at a majority of 410 seats. You'd think this is a mandate for nation-changing policy, but that low level of enthusiasm makes it difficult to go on a truly ambitious agenda, because you can squander that very quickly, right? You can quickly get into political trouble. So how do you think Keir Starmer will proceed as Prime Minister?
I think he's going to have a lot of difficulty, because he faces the same issue that all leaders across the G7 and across Western nations face at the moment, right? Which is there's still a problem with interest rates. Inflation seems to be abating, but people have still not fully recovered from the effect that's had on their household income. We have an issue of low growth across Western economies. The tax burden's already quite high here, as it is high in Canada and in other Western economies. So that leaves him with a lot less leeway to do things which are, popular or radical. And he hasn't really laid out in the way that Blair did in 97. When Blair came in 97, people, thought that they knew what they were voting. They were voting for something that was new, it was positive, it was progressive, all those kind of buzzwords that people thought they were getting. With Keir Starmer, he's not the Tories has been his biggest hand this election, simply because of the fact that my party, I'm sorry to say, has gone through this period of considerable turbulence and lots of leaders. Now, in some respects, he's starting from a point of low expectations, so that means he may well outlive those or outperform those low expectations. But I suspect actually the opposite will be true, is that he'll find himself with a very big majority. They won't have a lot of fiscal headroom to do a great deal. There'll be a lot of new Labour MPs thinking they're going to come in and change the world, and they're going to realise that actually they're facing exactly the same challenges that the Conservative government they've replaced has faced, with, as I say, not much fiscal headroom, headwinds economically, globally, all those issues. So, there is I think the biggest risk for Keir Starmer is he comes in with this big majority and disappoints beyond even what people were perhaps expecting.
If I can, just to pivot back to Nigel Farage and Reform UK, and I I know, look, it's a big gain for them if they get to these numbers, but they're still a rump party. But he's had an outsized influence in UK politics, right? When you look at the Brexit referendum and his role there and sort of the anti-Europe movement, we don't know yet if he's won his seat. But what would it mean if Nigel Farage gets a seat in the House of Commons and that sort of legitimacy and platform that goes beyond sort of the conservative media circles?
Well, look, it looks like he has won his seat. And there are two ways you can read this, right? The first one is, as you said, David, he's been the outsider. Well, now he's going to be on the inside. And his pitch has always been, put me in there. And when I'm in there, I'll sort this lot out. Well, the truth is, he's going to end up on the political inside. He's going to be in Parliament. And, perhaps he'll make such a noise in there and he'll result in, the people swarming to his party. Or I think the more likely outcome is people will be disappointed. He'll get into Parliament and face the same challenges the rest of us faces. It's that he has to not just make a good stump speech to a load of people who agree with you already. He's now actually got to practically engage on issues which are actually a lot more complex than he sometimes presents them to the public. So right. He'll either be found out or he will be a rabble-rouser who will be able to use this new platform to take his party forward. The history, however, of any party Nigel Farage has led, be it UKIP, be it the Brexit Party, is one of internal indiscipline, lots of internal arguments, and normally people end up leaving and the party ends up splitting. That's what happened to UKIP. It's what happened to the Brexit Party, which he previously led. So time will tell where this takes Nigel Farage, but I also wouldn't take away from him the fact that this is quite an achievement, having tried many, many times to get into the House of Commons. It looks this evening that he's got in with half a dozen, maybe even a dozen MPs, and that is quite an achievement. And it's unclear yet what that will actually mean for him, I think.
Okay. While we wait for the final results, there's a lot to watch in British politics in the days ahead. Former UK Conservative MP Andrew Percy, good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, anytime.
We continue to follow the UK election results where Keir Starmer, who you just saw, is on course to be the new UK Prime Minister. According to the exit poll done for the BBC, ITV and Sky News, Labour will win a majority by 170 seats. Now, these are just projections, but it has Labour at 410 seats, Rishi Sunak's Conservatives at 131 seats, their lowest ever. And the Liberal Democrats, the Lib Dems, are projected to come third with 61 MPs. For more analysis, I'm joined again by Hannah Barnes, the Associate Editor and Writer at the New Statesman. So Hannah, those are unofficial results. We do have one official result in. It's 1-0 for the Labour Party, a hold for them. What do you make of what we've seen in that? There's some interesting stuff in the vote shares.
Yeah, David, as you expect, this is Horton and Sunderland, which is in the northeast of England, big Labour heartland, and their shadow Education Secretary, about to become Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has held her seat. She's had that one since 2010. But what's really interesting is we've seen her share of the vote dip by a fair bit, but extraordinary Reform have beaten everybody into second place. And not just a little bit, they got 29% of the vote. Now, that is really a sign of what we may come to expect as the evening rolls on. That really is a big vote share. Bridget Phillipson was always going to be safe, but that will have the Conservatives running pretty scared, I would have thought.
No, that 29% is a high number for what is really kind of a party that's kind of on the fringes, right? And where Nigel Farage got into it sort of mid-campaign, I think it's fair to say. But the exit poll is suggesting that they're going to end up with 13 seats in the House of Commons. What are you hearing about that? I mean, the top line numbers in the exit polls are pretty good, but with the smaller parties, are there concerns there about the precision maybe?
Yeah, so in the last hour, we've had John Curtis, Professor John Curtis, who can only be described as the UK's polling guru. So he's actually responsible for helping to conduct and analyse the exit poll here. And he's been on the air in the last hour or so, and he's explaining that actually where we have the least certainty is with the smaller parties. So with Reform, for example, he said in quite a few of those seats, that it could go either way. It's really, really tight. So in fact, they could get slightly more, but they could get considerably fewer. They could have half that number. Similarly, with the SNP, he's quite surprised at how low that figure's come out. But again, there are so fewer data points, so fewer constituencies in Scotland, that it's much more difficult to get a reliable figure. So those ones that we see for the Conservatives and Labour, because they cover the whole of the United Kingdom, and obviously England is the biggest country in the United Kingdom, they're far more reliable. But he's urging a bit of caution around those Reform and SNP numbers in particular.
Okay, because that's interesting, because with the Scottish National Party, they had 43 seats at dissolution of the House of Commons, and the exit poll has them dropping down to 10. I know there have been issues with the leadership and different things in Scotland, but that is still a pretty seismic drop to lose 75% of your seats, essentially.
Oh, for sure. And it's been expected that Labour would become the biggest party in Scotland for the entirety of the campaign, but really not to that extent. And I don't think the SNP would expect to have lost quite so many seats either. So I think that's probably one to watch as we go through the evening.
Okay,
the early morning.
But okay, so that is with the smaller parties. Nothing that will change the overall trend line that is expected here. That Labour is not only maybe the biggest party in Scotland, the biggest party overall in the House of Commons. Reaction is starting to come in now, even just based on the exit polls. What are we hearing from the top people in the different parties?
Well, as the exit poll was announced live on air, Wes Streeting, who will be Health Secretary come tomorrow, actually was seen with tears in his eyes. He's one of these younger Labour parliamentarians, along with Bridget Phillipson, who's just retained her seat, who have never known a Labour victory. They first came into the House of Commons in 2010. They're in their 30s and 40s now, and they're in the wing of the party. So Bridget Phillipson, interestingly, refused to serve under Jeremy Corbyn. She refused to serve under a Jeremy Corbyn shadow cabinet. So it's those kind of people that this means a huge amount. And you have to remember that the Conservative Party are an electoral machine. They are so successful in this country at winning elections. This will be only the fourth time ever that Labour will have won a general election from opposition. So for those in the Labour Party family, we're hearing already, it just means so much to them. We've had Peter Mandelson, who was obviously very close to Tony Blair in those new Labour years, talk about it as an earthquake. He says a meteor has hit the UK this evening. And really no hyperbole is being spared, both from the Labour camp and really the Conservatives sound pretty despairing at all. We're hearing that Jeremy Hunt, who is the current Chancellor, looks incredibly likely to lose his seat. And David, we talked about Rishi Sunak an hour or so ago, but were that to happen to Jeremy Hunt, he would also be the first sitting Chancellor ever in UK history to lose his seat at the general election. So we are going to get a night of firsts, I think.
Yeah, a historic election for your country, no question. But just as a final point, you mentioned one of the candidates who won their seat tonight had refused to sort of sit with Jeremy Corbyn. Keir Starmer is taking this party in a very different direction, far more to the centre than sort of the almost extreme left, as Jeremy Corbyn is widely viewed. The size of the majority, if it was a narrow majority, Keir Starmer might struggle to go with a centrist agenda because he might be beholden to some of those Corbynite sort of MPs. Does this give him the license to do, there's a result coming in, by the way, in Northumberland. Are we going to take that live, guys? Or okay, we'll just update people when it comes in. Does this give him the ability to govern as a centrist prime minister, given the sheer size of the majority? It seems like it would give him that extra flexibility and comfort.
Well, interestingly, you would think so, but it appears that Labour's support is going to be wide but shallow. So it's going to come from all kinds of places, but the strength of support for Labour is really not that big. So if these reform numbers are correct, he's going to get pressure from the right, and he's going to get pressure from the left as well, particularly if these Liberal Democrat numbers are big. So he's going to not only have the left wing of the Labour Party to contend with, but also the left of centre Liberal Democrats. So he's really going to have to hold the centre ground, but it's going to be difficult. But I think he can do that. Speaking to his presumably the next Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, was at our New Statesman election party earlier this evening. He and the rest of the Labour shadow cabinet have huge faith in Keir Starmer that he can do that he's principled and he's strong. But it won't be easy, regardless of the majority.
Okay, there's a Labour hold in Blyth and Ashington we're hold, Hannah. So there you go. We're giving you some updated British UK election news in real time. I think you're going to hear Labour hold and Labour gain quite a bit tonight. But Hannah Barnes, look, thanks so much for joining us throughout the campaign. Thanks so much for being so available to us on such a busy day. Thank you very much for joining us again
It's
today.
a pleasure. Thanks, David.
Thank you. That's Hannah Barnes with the New Statesman in the United Kingdom. All right, we're going to turn back to the UK election now, where exit polls are predicting Labour has won a landslide victory in the general election. Keir Starmer is set to become the next Prime Minister, likely with a huge majority government. The CBC's Tom Parry is in London, and we go back to him now. So, Tom, we have the exit poll projections, which is a big Labour win. But because of the way they do the counting, do the announcing, we only got 2 seats actually reporting, still showing a Labour landslide. What stands out for you so far?
Okay, well, just to go over those numbers again, what the exit poll is showing is about 410 seats for Labour, 131 for the Conservatives, 61 for the Lib Dems, and the big surprise, 13 for Reform UK. As you say, we're still waiting. We're at a counting station here, and votes are being counted. We're just not hearing very many results coming in. Interesting results, though, have of the 2 seats that have been called, both for Labour. To my mind, I was here, they've got a TV set over here, and they're watching the election special, and they're, I was standing amid a bunch of Labour supporters as these results from Houghton and Sunderland South, which is a constituency in the northeast of England. They were watching these results come in. Big win for Labour, but there were audible gasps when they read out the rest of the results, because while Labour came in on about just under 18,887 votes for Labour, second place went to Reform UK, almost 12,000 votes. The Conservatives were a distant third with just over 5,000. Same story, and another riding came in, also in the northeast of England, Blyth and Ashington, about 20,000 votes for Labour, just over 10,000 for Reform, and the Conservatives, again, in a distant third at 6,000 votes. So, to my mind, that's pretty interesting. We were talking about this earlier in the program, how the story of Nigel Farage and Reform UK and the impact he's had on this campaign has really been one of the storylines that we're really going to have to keep following, because a lot of people were saying, oh, he'll win 2, he'll win 3. 13's pretty big. Now, this is preliminary data. It's just the exit polls. We're still waiting for votes to be very slowly counted as the night goes on. But right now, it's looking for a pretty good night for Reform UK, a very good night for Labour, not a great night for the Conservatives.
It's interesting, and not to obsess on Nigel Farage and a small rump party of the Parliament, but we've known for quite some time. Keir Starmer, Labour was going to win. The question is, how big of a defeat would it be for the Conservatives? But if Reform is getting these numbers, historically, a lot of these votes would have gone to the Conservatives. And I know there's some suggestion in the exit polls that they're least certain about the Reform projections and the Scottish National Party projections because of smaller sample size. But if Farage gets in there and gets a foothold, while Conservative has to figure out what to do after a defeat, that has a seismic potential impact in British politics, Tom.
Absolutely, and Nigel Farage has been open, saying he wants to be the Conservative voice in the House of in Parliament, and so that's his stated goal. Now, he's still far back from at least what this initial data is saying about the final results and what we're expecting them to be. But he's a well-known figure here in Britain. He's got a large following here in Britain. He was a leading voice in the Leave campaign, so a lot of people listened to him when they were voting to leave the European Union. So yeah, I think he probably is a force to be reckoned with. I'll just have one more thing that we were looking up, is that if these numbers hold, and Labour comes up with 410, we're looking back to 1997 when Tony Blair, the former Labour leader, he won 418 seats to become Prime Minister in that election. John Major got 165, and the Conservatives were put into opposition back then. So we are, in that territory. A worse result, if these numbers prove true, it's a worse result for the Conservatives, and part of that is because of Reform UK.
Yeah, it's interesting, and to see Labour double their seats in these projections and flirt with that new Labour Tony Blair majority, maybe getting that super majority that Rishi Sunak was warning British voters not to give Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. All right, Tom Parry, results are going to be counted all night. You've got a long night ahead of you. This is CBC's Tom Parry in London. Thanks so much, Tom. I'm David.